So I know we said that we were done with the experimenting with theory crafting weapons and damage and stuff like that, but there is still one weapon in particular that you guys really want to know about, and that is No Time to Explain. The last time anyone took any look at No Time to Explain was when we actually got it last year in the quest, and its big issue was the fact that it has a very obstructive visual element to it while shooting. All the sparks and electricity that stem from firing a burst can become pretty obnoxious because it blocks your vision. Now, back in the day when this archetype of pulse rifle was actually very strong in PvP, those of you who were around when Nerwin's Mercy was dominant know what I'm talking about, it was actually an alright pulse rifle to use, especially for PvP. That archetype of pulse has since been nerfed, and we've barely seen the likes of Nerwin's Mercy in PvP, much less No Time to Explain. All that being said, I was enjoying using the weapon for regular ad-killing purposes in the raid. The visuals took a little getting used to, and I think that before any other buffs happen to this pulse rifle in particular, Bungie would need to make it so this visual is significantly toned down, sort of like what they did to early Bad Juju, so you can, actually see. But using it in general was pretty satisfying, even if the main bonus on the weapon isn't anything remarkable. However, let's talk about the boss damage potential, which I know is the thing you guys want to know, and unfortunately I have some not great news for you guys. This weapon was tested at 391 attack against a normal mode Vosik, and the results are much less than you were probably hoping for. The main bonus of the weapon returns a shot to your magazine if it's a headshot, and it does it for free, meaning you can shoot forever if you get all headshots. At 1505 damage per shot, we're looking at 4515 damage per burst, and you can squeeze in about 45 bursts before you have to run, which sounds like a lot. But if we're perfect, that only results in 203,175 damage, which is not very good at all, and even in practice, you're probably not going to wind up with that amount of damage. That does not compare favorably to basically any of the heavy weapons that I've tested thus far, and it was much higher light than all of those other weapons that I tested. It does compare favorably to other non-Outbreak Prime primary weapons, but generally speaking, you shouldn't be using a primary weapon for boss damage unless you're completely out of ammo on everything else, or are using Outbreak Prime. However, when we look at something like Steel Medulla, well, Steel Medulla makes No Time to Explain look like Sleeper Simulant. Using around the same light level Steel Medulla, we can get about 27 bursts of the weapon off before we need to run away, each of those bursts doing 4,940 damage per burst, but every fourth burst does 6,572 damage thanks to the bonus, so basically 2 out of every 9 bursts from a magazine has the bonus, and then you gotta reload. Once again, this all sounds like a lot, until you add it all up, and it doesn't even break 150,000 damage if you were perfect. Basically, what all this means is that you can continue to ignore all primary weapons as a source of boss damage, unless that weapon is Outbreak Prime. Touch of Malice is still a weapon that needs some tests, and I'm actually not too sure on how it'll turn out. Now, I said that I enjoyed using Steel Medulla in the raid and in general, and the reason is not due to boss damage or anything like that. It is able to one-burst a lot of enemies, deal high damage to stuff like Vandals, and in general, handles pretty well. I rarely use it for boss damage, instead opting for the heavy hitters, Outbreak Prime, Sleeper Simulant, whatever. And in general, in PvE, as long as you have a high-level primary weapon, it doesn't really matter what that weapon is. It just comes down to a matter of personal preference at that point. I've been experimenting with a wide variety of primary weapons in the raid, and all of them perform very well for killing ads, as you might expect. But for boss damage, yeah, you can continue to ignore most primary weapons. The only primary weapon capable of being even remotely competitive in terms of boss damage, at least against the other heavy weapons or snipers, stuff like that, at this time, is Outbreak Prime. That is your No Time to Explain status update. In short, still a pretty good primary weapon for killing ads and stuff and general PvE play, but yeah, not as good at killing bosses as some other stuff. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.